Because of the rapid advances in science and technology during the last few centuries, some people have become convinced that science is the answer to everything. That is, that every human ill can be cured if only we apply the scientific method to solving our problems. There are also other individuals that hold the belief that people of faith have no need for science. God is the only resource needed, and the Bible is the only source of knowledge. Now, these are the extremes of the argument. Most people would fall somewhere in the middle of these two opinions. But the question remains, is there a conflict between faith and science? I believe that true faith and true science can coexist, for they are dealing with different areas of the human experience. Let me explain. Do you believe that Jesus Christ is the one and only Son of God, and that He rose from the dead on the third day? If you're a Christian, the answer to this question is most likely yes. This is an expression of faith, meaning you cannot prove this belief, it is not falsifiable. You cannot perform an experiment to repeat the resurrection. We have to accept the testimony of the witnesses of this event as recorded in 1 Corinthians 15. This is an area of faith. Now, what about science? Let's use Newton's laws of physics as an example. As a scientist, I can say with great confidence that these laws are true within certain practical limits. They are superseded by Einstein's laws in some cases, and I can reliably use them to compute the trajectory of a falling object. Unlike faith, science is subject to experimentation. We can conduct an experiment right now to determine the practical limits of Newton's laws. As a scientist, I accept the validity of the scientific method. I would, however, like to add one caveat to this statement. I accept the validity of the scientific method within the scope of the material world. The scientific method applies only to the physical universe that we can observe with our senses. Scripture tells us that there is a reality beyond the universe. This reality has not been observed by science, but that does not mean that it is any less real. It takes faith to interact with it. Let me further explain this with an example. Let's imagine the universe exists with only two dimensions. The inhabitants of this universe could be squares, circles, or triangles, objects that only have length and height but no depth. We can imagine that if these creatures were intelligent, perhaps they could even devise their own scientific method for making predictions in the universe, like measuring length, height, and acceleration. What if one day a three-dimensional object visited this universe? Let's say it's a sphere. How would they perceive this strange event? The two-dimensional science would be unable to interact with this higher dimension. In this scenario, our two-dimensional beings would require faith to believe that a being could exist outside their two dimensions. In the same way, what if the spiritual world the Bible speaks of exists on a higher dimension, one that the scientific method cannot measure? If this is the case, then this dimension could only be accessed through faith. Faith and science do not have to be at war. The scientific method, like all good gifts, is from God, and is excellent at measuring the physical world and making predictions based upon it. Applying the scientific method has produced wonderful results such as weather prediction, medicines, vaccines, and modern communication technologies such as this camera and the device that you are watching this video on. Faith is also vitally important to all people, for it enables us to connect with God. Hebrews 11:6 says that it is impossible to please God without faith. In other words, God never intended to be discovered by the scientific method. If we want a relationship with Him, then we must come to God on His terms, the experience of faith, not by experiments. What do you think about this? Do you think science and faith can coexist, or are they polar opposites? Let us know your thoughts by commenting below.